Start a little bit early.
There you go.
All right, so I'll start it as soon as I hit got it. Go. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. My name is John Curran. I am the current president of ARMA New England, and we want to welcome our sponsor and speaker today is David Gould from EncompaaS. We want to thank him for being our sponsor from New England first and foremost, and has a very interesting and current subject matter here with AI. Meg will kind of intro that a bit and introduce David. We go. I do want to remind people to go into membership at armane.org and register as a member of ARMA New England. We'd love to have you in the chapter. If you're not a sponsor already, we'd love to have you as a sponsor. We do have another upcoming event. It's this Saturday on the 2nd. It's a holiday party in Worcester, Massachusetts, and that is at 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. We'd love to have you join us there. So please go onto our website and for membership and to sign up for this holiday event and other events that we're going to have going forward. So at this point, I will hand it off to Meg, and she'll do a quick intro for David. And again, thanks, David, for doing this for us.
Our pleasure.
Hi, hello, everyone. As John mentioned, David Gould is from EncompaaS. He's the Chief Customer Officer there. He will be sharing his company's direct hands-on experience and results from integrating ChatGPT into their information governance platform. He has spent more than 15 years advising and solutioning for the large global enterprises, both for commercial and governmental, and on how to better manage and consume critical business information. The EncompaaS view is that ChatGPT offers one of the most opportunities to revolutionize enterprise information governance and records management programs. Behind this bold promise, though, ChatGPT has several serious concerns, and David will provide examples that showcase both the good and the bad of ChatGPT, including use cases where ChatGPT will have an immediate impact. So, David, take it away.
Thanks so much, Meg, and thank you, John, for making this all possible, and thank you to the entire chapter for inviting us into your home, especially during the holiday season, so thank you for that. And before I get rolling here, I do want to, on behalf of all my colleagues here in the U.S., we do want to wish everybody here at New England ARMA a very joyous and happy holiday season. So, and the other thing I should tell you is that I'm in the United Club at Newark International Airport. Hopefully, if I have some background noise, or somebody comes up to me and tells me I'm talking too loud, I'll have to lower my voice just a little bit, but I think we'll get through that okay. So I think from an introduction standpoint, ChatGPT certainly has captured the imagination of everyone, and I doubt there is an enterprise in America, commercial or government, that's either has not already implemented elements clearly of AI, artificial intelligence, but there's an incredible gold rush, I would say, of investigating how ChatGPT can revolutionize work. And for ChatGPT to work at its best and most effective level, the role of records management and information governance is absolutely mission critical, because the work that you do can take the disadvantages of ChatGPT and correct those. And it all goes back to a concept that we at EncompaaS called data quality. And I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. I do want to kind of qualify myself. Yes, I have been doing this for a long time, but I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a technology professional. As you can see, I slept through most of high school algebra. I'm actually a political science graduate who kind of fell in love with technology midway through my career. And of course, I haven't ever written a single line of code, but I do know a lot about how organizations consume information, as Meg so nicely said in the introduction. And part of my role is to listen to customers and information management, information governance, legal people, contract managers. Those are people that we target as we develop our solution here in the US. And we understand very carefully and closely what's happening in today's environment. Last year, I was on the speaking circuit and I talked a lot about how new technology, specifically AI, would impact your job, your role at your company. And there's been, I don't know if anybody here saw the movie What About Bob? It's a hilarious movie starring Richard Dreyfuss and Bill Murray. And it's the story about Richard Dreyfuss playing this psychiatrist and Bill Murray with a person who has multiple social and psychological dysfunction. Bill Murray walks into his first meeting with Richard Dreyfuss in the movie and says there's two types of people in this world, those who love Neil Diamond and those who don't. And I think our talking to AI, about AI, to information governance people, to records management professionals, that's kind of the same response or reaction. And it's not necessarily a disagreement with the concept of the technology, but there's two very large factors that we hear over and over again. It's, can I really trust the result? And also, does this mean my job's going away? Because ChatGPT, OpenAI specifically, has really major influence on how records managers, information governance professionals do their job. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So people always ask us, kind of what's the EncompaaS view on OpenAI? ChatGPT is a subset of OpenAI. OpenAI is much larger. Geez, it's been in the news quite a bit. The OpenAI Foundation, as most of you may know, fired its leader, Sam Altman. Microsoft, who's funded most of the OpenAI Foundation, immediately said, fine, you're going to fire him. We'll hire Sam and his 700 teammates to come work for Microsoft. And now he's back at the OpenAI Foundation, and all is love going forward, I'm sure. I'm soon whether on Netflix or Hulu, we'll soon see a movie made on this, but it's a pretty imaginative and interesting situation. But our view of OpenAI, as you can see on the screen, is that it's really about maturity. It has a lot of potential, but it also needs guardrails, and those guardrails can come primarily from information governance and records management professionals, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But before I do that, I want to kind of segue away from tech and talk about wine, specifically as it relates to data. Some of you may know that if you know me, I'm a big wine person. Living 30 minutes from Sonoma, the heart of Sonoma, makes it pretty easy to have that passion fulfilled almost on a daily basis. So I do want to spend a few moments talking about why people compare data to wine. And if you do a Google search, if you want to multitask while you're talking to me, if you Google that, you'll see there's quite a bit of discussion on this concept. I think the most notable thing is that the thing that wine and data really have in common is that you can store it in rows and columns, as you can see here by this wine rack that kind of looks like one of the wine racks I have at my house. But in addition to storing data and wine in rows and columns, they also share something else that's very common, and that's the importance of metadata. And metadata is a concept that's always been important for records and information governance, but it becomes increasingly important in the age of ChatGPT and AI. I'll talk about that in just a few moments. So actually, I want to just spend a few minutes talking about metadata for wine. This is a bottle of Kistler Chardonnay. It's a beautiful wine. I've sampled it myself, and it's quite good. And to kind of show you how you would produce metadata for wine, I built a table And this is comes off a review from Wine Spectator magazine. I extracted things from the review as well as off the back of the label. I think the really interesting piece here is that, you can build a very robust metadata table, including a disposition date for when wine is supposed to be consumed by. This bottle says it will last till 2034 if properly stored, but the reality is that, wine does not get better with age. And in fact, contrary to popular belief, most wines these days are manufactured for consumption within 6 months. And so if you go to Bevmo, you go to Total Beverage or Total Wine or whatever that name of that store is, they have racks and racks of wine. Most of that wine in the store is meant to be purchased, taken home, and consumed. Very little of that wine on those racks of those big stores is really meant to be stored and aged out like datum. The truth is that most red wines manufactured in the U.S. have no more than a 5-year lifespan, and whites and rosés are 2 to 3 years. So there's disposition, automated disposition built into winemaking for sure. Just a little bit of a segue here. This bottle that I'm showing, this Insignia wine, this is actually a bottle that somebody gave me. Well, actually, they didn't give it to me. When I was 4 years old, my mother took me to my first wine store in Chicago. She said, David, here's $35, and you can buy any bottle in the store that you want. And this is what I chose. Not really, but this is actually a very famous bottle of wine. It was produced in 1985. Joseph Phelps is a fantastic vintner, and his wines are renowned worldwide. Does also have a disposition date on it, and you can see I'm overdue for disposition with this wine. Meg, what I'd like to do is have you and John invite me back next year, maybe at the same time. I'll have consumed this wine by then, and I'll let you know how it tasted, if it actually was disposed of, if it should have gone through disposition in 28 or it hung on until 2024. The other thing that's really interesting is that this bottle, which was originally sold for $35, is now worth $476. So I'm really at a personal quandary, whether I keep this wine forever just to say I have it, or I actually try to drink the wine before it turns to vinegar. So that's something I'll also report back to you on next year. And you can see that if I actually went out to Bing Copilot and I said, Bing, I had put a prompt in and said, what can you tell me about this bottle of wine? Is it still drinkable? And this is the answer that came back in ChatGPT Bing Copilot. And as you can see, it's still drinkable. However, what it's telling me really is you better drink it soon before it ages out too much further, because it's not going to be very good. So as you can see that ChatGPT can provide advice on old wine, really the question becomes, what else can it do? Specifically, what about information governance? So I went back to my new best friend, Bing Copilot, and I asked about information governance and the impact of AI on the role. And this is what Bing told us. First, the way it's presented back, it talks about ChatGPT being a large language model. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with that concept. The important thing to note is that Microsoft just put out its version of Azure OpenAI in March, and already there's 100 million users of the service. And now you think about that next to Teams. It took 2 years in a pandemic for Teams to get to 100 million. And this is literally in a matter of months. And so ChatGPT is everywhere. And there's, been news stories about how people are using it. But from an information governance perspective, again, textbook, it comes out as source citations. This was from Patricia, I can't think of her name. She used to teach at San Jose State, a records management program there, but it came right from her book, and here it is. Then also ChatGPT, Bing also told us, to answer my question prompt that I asked about what's the impact on information governance. Here it is, and this is coming right from a computer. I wish I could say I could write as eloquently as Bing, but Bing is doing a much better job at it. And I think I want to call your attention kind of to that middle bullet, really about integrating and standardizing data. And what that's referring to is really how can you, in your role, basically understand the metadata of the content that you're custodian for. How can you automate the enhancement of that metadata? Because without strong information, without strong metadata, ChatGPT doesn't work as well as if you do have strong metadata to it from a privacy perspective, from a security perspective. So these are important concepts to understand. And then, I also asked, what are the shortcomings of ChatGPT, of AI concerning information governance? And you can see, just what I've referred to about data quality, data security. If any of you have memberships in Gartner, they have published tons of really important briefs on this subject. And if there is a common thread through all of the briefs that they're putting out, the most important thing is around the concept of data quality. While you're listening to me, if you want to segue off, open up another screen and put in data quality and ChatGPT, you'll get a lot of really important information. So really what it's saying is it's not necessarily what I would call a red herring, but there is a warning on it. And I think the issues around ChatGPT, when it comes down to it, really comes down to the role that you perform for your organization on a daily basis. I mean, what do? You discover records, you put records into a repository, you manage records according to retention labels. And these things are all really, really important, that you really work on improving the data quality of the content that you are responsible for managing for your organization. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some important trends that we see happening in ChatGPT. And, I've been selling AI-driven data classification technology since 2010 when I was at HP. And when we bought Autonomy, one of the great famous business stories that I'll be able to tell my grandchildren about when they get to a suitable age. We were out there talking about a product called Control Point, which was AI driven. And when you would classify the data and somebody smart in the room, a records manager would say, well, how do you know the answer is true? It was really hard to explain. And most of the time I instructed our sales team to say, hey, if we tell you that, it's our secret sauce. And if we tell you that secret sauce, we have to kill you, kind of thing. So that really, for a number of years, really impeded the usage of AI, especially in the space of information governance, because it was really not very explainable and you couldn't understand the result. Nobody can understand that. Obviously, there's a lot of issues around ethics. I'm not going to get into that as a product. From a product company, we don't get into that as well, but clearly explainability and data quality, if you address those two issues up front, as you implement ChatGPT in your organizations to do data classification, that's a big plus forward. It's a big step forward. The other thing is that what we also see happening is ChatGPT AI specifically has been in the domain of data science. We work with a very large pharmaceutical organization. They have a whole team of data scientists that do nothing but spend the entire day is how can they discover data and do analysis of the data to solve problems regarding the development of pharmacology and those kinds of things. But what's happened over the last 2 to 3 years, especially the last 24 months, this concept of autonomous modeling has really come into focus. And what that means is you don't need to rely on expensive data scientists to help you, come up with models that help you classify information. You can do that autonomously from using a solution like ours. And that's an important step forward. So talk about job security. The job I really don't want to have today is being a data scientist, because this technology is moving fast and really furious in terms of making it easy for everyone to use. And I would say that if you've chosen your life to be a data scientist, especially as relating to how it impacts content, your future is way less secure than it is if you're in records management or information governance. And I think that, clearly too, one of the big things is that there is greater human collaboration now around AI, because essentially the solution is being democratized, much in the same way Google democratized search. I don't know if you're familiar or if you read Gartner, but they publish what's called a content services platform. It replaced report area. It replaced the old enterprise content management magic quadrant, which I think most of us who have been in the business for a long time really kind of look forward to it every year. If you were a vendor like myself, I didn't look forward to it too much because I knew the products that I was working on and pushing into market, never really got the upper right-hand corner treatment from Gartner. We were always kind of viewed as a niche solution. But they transformed around 2019. They dropped the old ECM Magic Quadrant, and now they call it Content Services. And they've divided Content Services platform market up into various boxes. The fastest growing part of that box is something that Gartner calls intelligent document processing. And what that essentially allows you to do is to go into repositories, records repositories, other repositories, extract documents, and attach that in an automated way to a business process. So if you think about that, that's a really important transformation. Again, the need for high quality data becomes even more important in this space. And the other question is that Gartner asks and talks about in their IDP studies is, how can you use AI tools to identify and actually use the content that you're responsible for managing? The old days of putting content, aged out content, content that might have been created a year ago, and then if it's a record, you put it into a repository. You put it into a repository. I have some noise behind me. I'm sorry. I hope it's not too interfering. Is it coming through loud? And is it interfering with my voice? Promoting after Thanksgiving. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Hang on just a second. Can you turn that down just a little bit, please? Thanks. Okay, good. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah. So anyways, the baseline here is really kind of the next slide. So this is how Gartner looks at how they define intelligent document processing. The real key thing I've added in these, or I annotated this slide to put records. Think about all the information that you're responsible for processing and holding and being custodian of in your organization. That content includes records like invoices, purchase orders, and includes important images and videos, emails, and things like that, forms. So really the connection between the fastest growing part of the content services platform market and what you do is becoming increasingly important. And the way Gartner lays out content services, data classification is right next to IDP, intelligent document processing. If you don't know much about this, send me an email, david.gould@encompass.cloud, and I can share with you some reports that Gartner has given me permission to send out. I can send you some PowerPoint slides on this, but this is a really mission critical breakthrough in how content can be used, not just stored for retention purposes. And that's what we see driving most of the AI concepts in data classification. It's not just to classify the data according to a taxonomy, it's to give you the ability to push data back out into the enterprise so it can be attached to important business processes. So, from our view, AI-based outcome is really dependent on the data that's fed into the analytics engine. And this is a little bit of a promo slide, but it's important, in the fact that AI without the right data is simply just artificial. It's not going to give your business and your organization the outcome it needs based on the investment it's making in this important technology. We work very closely with Microsoft. In fact, Microsoft brings us into opportunities specifically because they know our technology is focused in on helping improve data quality and providing guardrails to making ChatGPT effective and safe within a corporate enterprise or a business enterprise. So it's really important to know that, if you use Azure OpenAI, Azure ChatGPT within your Azure Cloud Framework your Azure Cloud Framework that's powering M365 and other tools in your environment, including Purview, that data, while ChatGPT is based on algorithms that are managed from billions of transactions, is not subject to. It doesn't take the data outside to look for answers. They transfer the algorithms into your environment, and it provides a pretty important safeguard. We can also I'll make this slide deck available for you to take a look at as well. We get asked a question often: what is the difference between machine learning and OpenAI or ChatGPT? The primary difference is that supervised machine learning requires training. And I think if you've been involved with automation technology that does data classification, you actually have to teach the technology what the classification scheme is, and also how to interpret the data that it's analyzing to bring to that data taxonomy. With Azure OpenAI, specifically with ChatGPT, there is no training involved. Azure OpenAI, like any OpenAI tool that's coming from the OpenAI Foundation, is based on billions and billions of transactions. There are so many things that ChatGPT can understand without being trained. And what that means really is that it gives you an opportunity to quickly implement a ChatGPT application around data classification in your environment and without the need for complex training. However, there are some limitations to what ChatGPT can do, specifically around the concept of concept or context. We just finished an engagement, a POC engagement with a very large engine manufacturer. They have one of their key products is codenamed Hedgehog. And basically, when we did an analysis of what was in a file share at this organization, the answer from ChatGPT says, well, we don't understand what Hedgehog is. Why would this company be interested in a furry little animal? So the end game of the story is while ChatGPT and OpenAI is really powerful and can handle about 90% of content when it relates to classification, that other 10% has to be bolstered by the use of other AI-based technologies, most specifically supervised machine learning. I want to stop right now because I think there's a bunch of questions coming in. Meg, well, Susan's jumping. Geez, Susan Gleason. I'm surprised. Let me just see if there's Pat. Pat Franks. Thanks, Chris. I couldn't remember her name. So there are some legitimate questions here. Are there policy suggestions for AI? Are there ways to adjust for human biases, assumptions? Yes, and in the way we have implemented OpenAI into our solution is we give the user an opportunity to prompt the system. That's like query. That's prompt is the Microsoft word for query, and basically asking the question in the right way or refining the prompt is as critically as important as it's very similar to training that you would have to do. So instead of training the data, what you really have to do is you have to train yourself to ask very precise questions. And our solution gives an opportunity to continually improve your prompts to get you a better outcome for the question. That's a really good question, by the way. And then the other question is, are there methods for authentication of AI created material? I believe so. I know in the use of Bing Copilot, every element of an answer that's provided by Bing has a source citation. So that's also important. Let me get back to the presentation. Please continue to ask questions and I'll get to them during the course of the presentation. There's also this concept that ChatGPT is subject to a lot of erroneous assumptions. I think some of those are inferred in the questions that are being asked. ChatGPT does have guardrails. By the way, this is my language. This is not being generated from ChatGPT. And, if you've experimented around, the models that are being used to help you look for information are restricted. There are pretty strong restrictions that don't let you kind of get off kilter. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't prevent you from producing content that you say is your own, that is based on other people's work. This is a big issue. The Hollywood writers' strike was all about the use of ChatGPT and protecting intellectual property. So it's a big issue. The other thing is that unlike supervised machine learning, which is based on training, learning, the more information you provide it, the better the answer you get back. ChatGPT does not have an ability to learn. Rather, it relies on the billions of transactions and then the algorithms based on those transactions that allow you to understand and get the right answer to questions. And again, I've said this a few times, but I can't stress it enough. The information, the output that you get is only as good as the information that's available for analysis. That is, by the way, an issue that Microsoft has come to us to help. If not every piece of information lives in SharePoint. SharePoint is the source data pool that Microsoft uses to power Bing Copilot. 80% of your unstructured content may be outside of SharePoint. So the question is, how can you identify information that you wanted to be included in a data pool that ChatGPT can interrogate? How can you find that information and bring it across and put it into a SharePoint environment? That's also a key challenge. So the issue is not only about understanding the information and getting correct answers, it's having data pools that are broad enough and that are also have data quality around privacy and security. The guardrails, if you put a broadening of a bigger scope of information with the right guardrails, you are going to get a better output. At EncompaaS, we use multiple AI solutions to kind of cope or compensate for issues that I talked about before. Understanding contents. We work with a very large pharmaceutical manufacturer where code names are key, where drug names appear. Those are things that ChatGPT really doesn't understand unless those names are in public use. So these are things that you need to kind of consider as you look for ways to bring ChatGPT into and OpenAI into how you classify data. The other thing that's really important about using OpenAI and ChatGPT specifically, right now it's much less expensive in terms of processing cost, although with the advent of ChatGPT 4.0, the cost of processing actually is increasing significantly. However, Microsoft has a complete data costing schedule, and you can understand what you're getting into based on the amount of content that you're pushing through the solution. Our current offering, uses GPT 3.5 Turbo. The queries are never stored. The data is secure. We only there's no storage of a query. So if you ask a prompt, that prompt becomes part of a record, but it doesn't get exposed outside of your business. And only users of our solution who are authorized can actually push information into it, and also authorized to, by who you are and what role you play in your organization, can see appropriate answers. So we're applying some of the same security models as it applies to privacy and permissioning, which has always been part of the information governance and records management role. Here's just a few screenshots I thought I'd share. I don't put this up here to be a shameless plug, but we are one of the first information governance platforms that have fully integrated OpenAI into the solutioning. And I call your attention to the right side of the screen, where you actually have little narratives. This is part of how we can use OpenAI to actually improve the explainability of results, and it gives you a greater sense of confidence that the information that's coming back to a query that you're running through a search tool, for example, is absolutely correct, and it's also been classified correctly, and the metadata has a high level of quality. So you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, based on the rendering of this document on the left side, there's a complete description of what this document is. And that description is actually related to the confidence score that has been assigned by ChatGPT to the confidence that 90% sure that this document is a business agreement and it's been classified appropriately. Here's another tool that we use to also improve explainability of result and give you greater sense of confidence. Our solution is really designed to look at multiple aspects of a piece of content. It's just not the author, it's not the headline, but we look at what I would 360-degree view of that content. We're looking at purpose statements, we're looking at clearly at the content, headings, titles, and you can actually use training systems that we have built into our solution to refine these things. So if you look on the right-hand side, this is an EncompaaS internal business policy, and we know that that's different from a standard operating procedure, and it's based on the fact that the purpose is at 98%, the content is at 85%, and the heading is at 68%. The other thing that we do to help improve explainability of artificial intelligence provided answers is we provide this concept of separation. Essentially, separation tells you how different one piece of content is from another. And in this case, you have a score of 77% that this is an EncompaaS policy document. And we know that we bolster that confidence rating by the fact that there's a pretty large difference between what that is and just a standard operating procedure using this concept that we call separation. I've kind of given you a little bit more of a blow up of the explainability. And again, this is really giving you a better sense of confidence that if you're using a solution like ours to classify your information against the taxonomy or against your file plan, and you want to assign retention labels and other labels to it, you're doing it in an appropriate way. I talked a little bit about the importance of asking prompts in the right way. Here we have the ability for you to ask questions of ChatGPT, of OpenAI, and it gives you the ability to actually refine that question in a number of ways. So that's also a very important part. Again, prompting the system with the exact right answer is way more important now than it was before, just using standard search tools to give you the precision of answer that you're looking for. Oops, and I think that's the end of my presentation. I do want to open it up for questions right now, and I also have some additional comments based on the questions. I don't know, Meg, if you want to open the phone lines, if people want to ask me that live, or we just want to use the chat window to ask it. I'll start off with one of the questions that I'm looking at right now. The question is, are there ways to place safety checks in case one decides to use the capability in an unpleasant fashion? Absolutely. One of the slides that I showed talked a little bit about that. Our Chief Product Officer, Jamie Tilbrook, was experimenting around with ChatGPT one night, and he asked a question, made a prompt, and the prompt was misinterpreted as Jamie wanting to go out and get, bad material. I don't want to say it specifically, but, the system thought he may have been looking for, pornography, but he wasn't. So there are safeguards that OpenAI places on content. It won't allow you to, it won't produce answers, I should say, that, are not permitted. So there are some safeties built into the solution, but with our solution, that safety is enhanced because we have the ability to add permission of the user to see the information, as well as providing the ability to redact or remove privacy information. One of the key things that we've seen through our experience so far is that when you do a prompt, one of the big concerns is that the answer comes back excludes, that these answers have to exclude highly personal or highly confidential information. And only by having data quality imposed on that document before it goes into a ChatGPT data pool can you solve that problem. the last thing you want to do is, if you're responsible for your company's travel management program, you write a prompt and say, who are the biggest violators of travel management policies? If the CEO's name comes up at the top of the list, which it could with, if you don't want to have that person exposed, that's a big issue. The same holds true with confidential information. If that information is stored in SharePoint without having tags on it that says do not go to OpenAI or do not be used in a ChatGPT prompt, you have a problem that you have a real risk of exposing confidential information in it. So that's a very good question. Any other questions?
If anyone has a question and they want to speak up, just unmute yourself and ask away.
Also, David, you had an email, I believe, where, if people want to ask questions offline or contact you directly, that's something you'd be open to, I would assume.
Absolutely. My label on myself says, yes, I will give permission to anybody who sends me an email. I will be glad to send it to them. On the screen, as you can see, there's my email. Please send it to me. I can share this deck with you. If you have any other questions, or if you even wanted to see the solution and how we're using it, we'd be more than happy to arrange that for you.
Mr. Gold, it's Miss Gore.
Miss Gore, how are you?
Thank you. How are you? I think what might be helpful for everyone is giving us some guidelines on how do you best go about becoming a ChatGPT expert. What would you recommend the steps that people do? Because the question that we're being posed is, how are we going to manage it from an information governance standpoint? But if you don't know what you're talking about, it's kind of hard to manage it. So what would you suggest, what steps people would take to get themselves a little bit more in the know?
Ms. Gore, I wish I could say I paid you $5 to ask that very good and provocative question, but I didn't even know you were on the call. So thank you for asking, because it's a very important question from a management perspective. Whoops. I think there's a foundational knowledge that you have to get. And I think that foundational knowledge first is based on this concept of data quality. The good news is most people sitting on this call today have an understanding of what data quality is, because essentially that's what records management is all about, is improving data quality to a point where it can be managed for retention and disposition and those kinds of things. So assuming that you do have that strong data quality foundation understanding, I think the next step is for you to connect the dots between what you know about data quality and doing some research on ChatGPT. If you are a Gartner subscriber, they have really great articles on this. I get probably 2 briefs a day, and a good part of my day is actually spent, kind of trying to understand this better myself. So, legitimate sources who understand OpenAI from a technical perspective, like Gartner, are really good places to start that knowledge journey. Also, attending professional association meetings or going to conferences. There was a pretty large OpenAI or AI track at the most recent National ARMA convention. ACC had a track. So there's lots of professional associations that are putting uber focus in on the subject right now. I think the most important element in terms of where you research is, I think you should utilize the sources that you trust the most, because there is a lot of garbage about ChatGPT out there. There are also people who I would consider to be industry experts who are naysayers on using ChatGPT specifically in an enterprise organization. I don't understand how they can come to that conclusion, but the fact is the fact is that there are this is a technology that's already being widely used across your business enterprise. I would say that information governance, records management perspective, you're one of the last organizations in the large enterprise that are looking at how to adopt this. Now, some of you have been using auto classification for sure, but the state of the art of this technology is advancing so fast. It's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we get smarter about this. Great question, Ann. Thanks so much for attending too.
I think, and just from the conversations that I've been involved in, the reason they're saying not to use AI is because they don't have a handle on the security, the data security and data privacy models that are being used. I think I don't think that anybody looks down on the use of AI to accomplish goals, because I mean, you look back and many of the people on this call use a company called Latera, and Latera's using AI behind their document productivity suite in the past for almost 10 years, 15 years. So we have it in the environment. I think they're more concerned about, from a data privacy and security, do we have the right, is the tool that we're using going to protect our kingdom?
Yeah, and that goes back to kind of one of the themes, that I've shared with you over the last 45, 50 minutes or so. And that really is security and privacy as concepts need to be part of your data quality program. If that part of if security and privacy somehow passes across and over the top of unstructured content specifically, I think your organization runs a very large risk, and that's where it does get into trouble. So foundationally, again, that concept of data quality is very important, and privacy and security from use of artificial intelligence is right at the top, is right at the center of the intersection of those concepts. Ruth has asked a question. You've asked a lot. This is great. Thanks for this. Ruth has asked me, wondering about AI and staff, are there resources for sharing? I think, and are there ways to explain AI in everyday language for conversations? Microsoft has a really good library on that. I won't say they've dumbed down the story, but there are some, pretty good resources there. And as I've said, professional associations like ARMA does have a lot of information on AI, and other organizations like ACC. I think Ruth is also asking another really important question. Is there a way to make room for RM, IG at the table in a federal government conversation? I would hope so. It's incumbent upon everybody on this call to get at the table, especially as it relates to implementing technologies like ChatGPT. And without the role of records management to say and stand up and say, hey, the data that we have in SharePoint has been vetted through a methodology for security and privacy, that to me is one of the greatest opportunities that I see. I think really AI in a way of transforming records management is probably the most important transformation tool that I've seen in this industry, and I've been doing it for a long time. I think it's even more important than classification learning, because the bottom line is that this technology can give you a better taxonomy than maybe what you already have in place. And it's really, really good at finding information and putting it in the right spot on that taxonomy ladder that's automated and built for you. We've had direct experience where we're using these databases, and one of the things we did, somebody did a query and came back with a paragraph in French from the French philosopher Stendhal. And it actually, ChatGPT said, you know what, you don't have in your taxonomy a place for a document like this to be stored. For some reason, it was being stored as a record. Maybe, it wasn't, it shouldn't have been in a records repository. It somehow made its way in there. But its ability to look at things like taxonomies and make suggestions where your taxonomy doesn't work, or it's not inclusive, or it's too inclusive, those kinds of things are really important tools. So to me, I have never seen a technology that has more potential for advancing the state of IG and RM, especially in getting a bigger and broader seat at the management table for those who have chosen this as their profession.
Thank you,
If I might
David.
jump in, I think, I'm sorry, Ann.
This is Ruth. I'm,
Yes, Ruth.
I'm the one with all the questions.
I love them.
Um,
Thank you.
so, I am starting to see that really there are several professions that all need to be at this table and shared at the table and have a much wider conversation now that Biden has come out with his executive order about working on this. So what I really see is that as well, there has to be a bridge made with the AI companies to say, hey, look, we need the conversation and we have to be in the room as this is created. As well, it's now getting to the point of that you have a technology that can modify a document, that can modify an image. So it becomes, is this verifiable? Is this trustworthy? So besides just security and privacy, we need to just define what trustworthy means. We need to define what verifiable means. And to me, what I'm also hearing is that this will change the profession of just work in general to the point where it will become a new conversation in HR of modifying the position of HR and modifying the professions into one that I've now heard in several webinars to the point of constant learning. So I really see that it's a much broader conversation between several professions to come to the table with open AI, social media. Everyone needs to be there. Everyone needs to start this conversation because everyone's going to have some perspective on privacy, trustworthy, verification, security. There will be different points and different aspects brought up. We can bring one aspect here, but there will be another angle somewhere else.
I'm in violent agreement with you, Ruth. I mean, I think that you've raised some very important ideas, and you know, from a small company that's focusing on improving data quality, I don't know how much we can influence that conversation. And I think the influencing of that conversation and the direction of that conversation really has to come from you, the professionals who understand data, especially unstructured data, the best. There's nobody else in an organization that understands unstructured data better than you do. I mean, and with ChatGPT having the ability to produce unstructured data, RFPs, contracts, all of these things that are, can be automated through a careful use of ChatGPT. We've actually built a prototype solution for a very large government agency on the West Coast. They want to automate their use of ChatGPT. They want to use ChatGPT to automate the production of and production of RFPs to cover all the purchasing that government organization has to make. So I think you raise incredibly important questions. And again, I have to point the finger at every one of us in the room because this is our role. This is what we have been trained to do. We are all about improving data quality for our enterprise. We're all about, retaining information in a safe way. We're all about providing a verification and validation that the information that's being used is the actual document of record. So all of those things are incredibly important, and I really appreciate you making that comment.
You're welcome. And it's also that I'm going to several webinars depending on where I feel that I need information can be heard from. And so I try to keep myself at least aware enough of the effect that things are having. And like it's going to become that we're going to have conversations just with our kids. We're going to have conversations with administrators. It's going to become necessary to, as I was trying to point out, have everyday language because this conversation is probably going to have to start by the time someone's 5-6 years old at some point, is to understand just the basic of this technology, as well if we're in some instances expecting kids to also try to do basic coding. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there has to be some introduction. And I think that several states are moving towards that. It's just now that without having guardrails, there's more of a ripple than if guardrails were present before implementing a technology. Now we're having an after effect.
Yeah, I mean, to just add to what you're saying there, my daughter is a school teacher. She teaches 5 and 6-year-olds online. I mean, if you think about the impact of AI in teaching kids how to learn, I went to school and I had to learn how to write cursively. Nobody teaches cursive writing anymore. That's not such a big deal, but if you're teaching a young person how to intellectually think about something, and the best way to do that is express that in writing, if you don't really have to process this intellectual thought process in your head, and you can just go to a computer and ask it a question and it comes back written for you, I worry about that as well. Again, our focus is really in the commercial enterprise or the government enterprise, but there are huge societal implications for this, and it's obviously the reason why from the president's office down, there's a lot of to the U.S. Congress. There is a heck of a lot of discussion of this, and what needs to be regulated, what kind of guardrails need to be mandated, etc. So those are all very good points. All right, John, I'm going to throw it back to you. We're at the top of the hour.
Sure. Well, Meg, thank you for moderating and picking up the chats. I hope everybody got their questions answered. Again, David has provided an email to send additional questions to. So we really appreciate you having you on board here and as a sponsor as well. Again, if you do want to become a member of ARMA New England, look us up and join us actually at our event on Saturday as well. But we appreciate everyone that came on this call and got to listen to David and their solutions and learned a bit as well about this topic. Really appreciate it. Meg, do you have any other final thoughts as well? Whoop, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Yep, I just
There you go.
realized that. We will be posting the recording. I'll send out the link to everybody who's attended or registered. And it will be a private link in YouTube. And once David sends them to me, I'll post the slides on our event site. Thank you, everybody, for
Awesome.
attending.
Yes, thank you. Take care.